Let me call the hearing to order. Good morning. The committee meets today to discuss the global security challenges confronting the United States. Before I introduce our witnesses, I would like to welcome the members of the Armed Services Committee to our first public hearing of the 118th Congress. And I'm pleased to welcome our new ranking member, Senator Roger Wicker. He is a tremendous colleague, and I look forward to working with him, leading this committee in the bipartisan fashion that has been done for many, many years. And to our returning members, thank you for your continued service and partnership. And to our new members, Senator Mullin, Senator Budd, and Senator Schmidt, welcome. I look forward to working with each of you. Okay. Now, I have been informed, since we have a quorum, and that's transitory, since the quorum is now present, I ask the committee to consider 1,790 pending military nominations. All these nominations have been before the committee their required length of time. Is there a motion to favorably report this list of 1,790 pending military nominations to the Senate?
So moved.
Is there a second? Thank you very much. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
The motion carries. Thank you. And returning now to my comments. We're lucky to have our extremely talented witnesses with us today, and we understand there are significant challenges facing us, from China's growing influence to Russia's reckless aggression. Our nation faces a complex and dangerous security environment. Prevailing in this environment will require thoughtful, resolute strategies informed by experts like those before us today. Dr. Bonnie Lin is the director of the China Power Project and senior fellow for Asian Security at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. She's an expert on U.S. military strategy in the Indo-Pacific, with leadership experience across the Department of Defense and with the RAND Corporation. Dr. Fiona Hill is a senior fellow in the Center on the United States and Europe at the Brookings Institution. Dr. Hill has served as the top advisor for European and Russian policy on the National Security Council and is an expert on issues related to Russia, Central Asia, energy, and strategic competition. Mr. Roger Zakheim is the director of the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation and Institute. He is an expert on U.S. defense strategy, having served as a professional staff member on the House Armed Services Committee and other national security positions. He currently serves on the 2022 National Defense Strategy Commission. Our objective today is to examine the national security issues that this committee should consider as we prepare for the fiscal year 2024 National Defense Authorization Act. As the Biden administration's national defense strategy makes clear, China is our primary competitor. It is the only nation with both the intent and the capability to mount a sustained challenge to the security and economic interests of the United States and its allies and partners around the world. At the same time, Russia remains a violent, destabilizing force. Putin's assault on Ukraine has inflicted horrific suffering on innocent civilians seeking a free and democratic society. It's threatened European stability and harmed the global economy. In addition, nations like Iran and North Korea continue to push the boundaries of military brinksmanship, and issues like terrorism and climate change remain persistent. The significance of these threats is widely understood. The question is how to address them in order to deter or mitigate the threat to U.S. national security and international stability more broadly. To begin, we have to recognize that America faces an existential struggle between democracy and autocracy. Beijing and Moscow seek to change the international order by exploiting vulnerable nations through coercive economic and military pressure. America must offer an alternative to this kind of foreign policy. Given the economic, cultural, and geographic ties between many of our partners in China, we can't ask them to choose between engaging with the United States or China based solely on an economic or military calculation. We should use all our tools of statecraft and build mutually beneficial relationships. Indeed, forging and maintaining strong international partnerships is likely to be the decisive factor in any future conflict. We have seen this through Ukraine's remarkable performance against Russia, and it will hold true also in the Pacific. Our greatest comparative advantage over China is our network of allies, and strengthening that network should be at the center of our strategy moving forward. The development of the Quad involving the United States, Japan, India, and Australia presents a valuable framework. Similarly, our defense agreement with Australia and the United Kingdom, known as AUKUS, provides an excellent platform for improving the capabilities of our allies and increasing our engagement in the region. Our adversaries' presence around the globe is evolving. I would ask our witnesses to share their assessment of the Ukraine conflict in the larger context of the evolving international order, as well as the implications for U.S. defense strategy going forward. Similarly, I would like to know what military and non-military factors are most likely to impact Chinese decision-making with respect to potential aggression against Taiwan. As the recent shoot-down of the Chinese surveillance balloon in our airspace should remind us, the top priority of the national defense strategy is homeland defense. America's skies and seas must be secure to protect its citizens, and the Department must pursue technologies that provide forward detection to buy decision time for decision makers. Finally, as we adapt to meet these global challenges, we need to consider that we are entering an era of trilateral nuclear competition. The Cold War was essentially a bilateral rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union, which developed deterrence theory and communications methods based on two competitors. That has changed with the ascendancy of China and its growing nuclear arsenal. I would ask our witnesses to help us understand this new trilateral dynamic and how it may impact efforts to deter the use of nuclear weapons. Ultimately, long-term strategic competition is not just a rivalry of military or economic power, but also a competition of ideas. This requires us to develop an understanding of our adversaries' strengths, weaknesses, philosophies, and objectives, as well as our own. This is where the knowledge and insights of the experts before us today are so valuable. I look forward to our witnesses' testimony, and I thank them again for their participation. And let me now recognize and turn to the ranking member, Senator Wicker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to congratulate you for once again holding the position of chair of this important committee. As ranking member, I hope to and expect to continue the great bipartisanship that's become a tradition of this body. Also, let's take a moment to salute my predecessor, the Honorable Jim Inhofe of Oklahoma. He left us Oklahoma-sized cowboy boots to fill, and we're going to do our best to carry his legacy forward with a relentless focus on supporting the men and women who protect America every day. I want to salute and recognize the invaluable contributions of our returning members and welcome three new members of our committee. Senator Mullen from Oklahoma, Senator Budd from North Carolina, and Senator Schmidt from Missouri. Their states play a critical role in defending our nation. Also, there are a number of service members and veterans there. And particularly, I'll say to Mr. Budd, my first active duty station as then Captain Wicker was Seymour Johnson Air Force Base. So I hope you'll look out for my buddies there at Seymour Johnson as well as the entire military. Today's hearing is an important opportunity to speak with experts, and so we welcome them, particularly important as we begin to craft this year's National Defense Authorization Act, hopefully earlier than usual. The United States faces an increasingly complex and dangerous security environment. Indeed, it is fair to say that this is the most dangerous moment since the Cold War. The Chinese Communist Party is engaged in a massive project of military modernization, and its threat to unify, as they say, and I would say invade Taiwan, becomes clearer every day. Nearly 1 year ago, Beijing's junior partner, Russia, launched an unprovoked and brutal invasion of Ukraine. This war poses a direct threat to peace and prosperity on the European continent and to America's vital economic and security interests. Moscow's war machine in Ukraine is aided by Iran. In addition to supplying Russia with lethal drones, Iran continues to spread mayhem elsewhere as it marches closer toward a nuclear weapons capability. Iran's volatility and malign influence is matched by North Korea. The 38th parallel remains one of the most dangerous places in the world. Further, we cannot take our eye off the global war on terror. Global terrorist organizations continue to recruit, train, and operate in the greater Middle East and beyond, and pose a direct threat to us here in our homeland. Our first job in this committee is to provide the tools our military needs to deter and defeat these threats. There's no doubt that continued real growth in the defense budget, top line, above inflation, real growth above inflation is an absolute necessity, a bare necessity. We are in the crucial years of this military competition, and we cannot afford to let our guard down, Mr. Chairman. This committee led the bipartisan charge to increase the defense budget in last year's cycle, a successful effort. I hope our witnesses will provide their views on the defense budget top line and the need to resource our war fighters, as well as initial thoughts on how to tackle the manifold threats we face from adversaries abroad. The war in Ukraine illustrates the importance of properly funding our military. On a bipartisan basis, Congress has provided billions of dollars of equipment and munitions to help the Ukrainian armed forces defend their country's sovereignty and independence. Although we have provided considerable resources, I remain disappointed that the administration has been hesitant to provide Ukraine with advanced capabilities to secure victory. Time and again, the administration's reluctance to provide rapid delivery of critical capabilities, Stingers, Javelins, HIMARS, and Abrams, to name a few, has cost the Ukrainians valuable time. It has led to the protracted battle of attrition we may be seeing today. So I would ask our witnesses to comment on the war and suggest ways that this committee can continue to help the brave and steadfast Ukrainian troops actually win, rather than preserve a stalemate. Now, here at home, the war in Ukraine has exposed shortcomings in our defense industrial base and supply chains. Expanding our lines of production, especially for critical munitions, should continue to be a priority this year. I would welcome our witnesses' perspective on this issue and how it applies to the Taiwan situation. The defense industrial base is not only important for today's fight in Ukraine, but of supreme importance for the competition with the Chinese Communist Party. Both the Trump and Biden administrations have placed strategic competition with China as the top priority for the national defense strategy. The previous Republican administration and the current Democratic administration have been together on this issue. Winning this competition will require a significant investment in developing and fielding game-changing technologies that will keep us a step ahead of Beijing. In addition to developing transformational technology, outcompeting China will require increased production of platforms and weapon systems such as our battle fleet of ships. Congress proved last year that it could take bold steps to advantage the United States by passing the CHIPS and Science Act. We would be interested in our witnesses' views on how this committee can help the Department of Defense focus on the long-term strategic competition with the Chinese Communist Party in this respect. So I thank our witnesses. I thank the indulgence of my friend, the chair. I would note that the namesake of Mr. Zackheim's Institute, President Reagan, summed up his national security policy as peace through strength. And I hope all of my colleagues continue to keep that motto in mind as we embark on this very important year. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator Wicker. Dr. Lynn, please.
Thank you. Chairman Reed, Ranking Member Wicker, and distinguished members of the Senate Committee on Armed Services, thank you for the opportunity today to testify at this important hearing. I will focus on three issues: the nature of the PRC challenge, what the United States is doing, and how China is responding. The 2022 U.S. National Security Strategy appropriately identifies China as the only competitor with both the intent to reshape the international order and increasingly the economic, diplomatic, military, and technological power to do it. China continues to coerce U.S. allies and partners. China continues to engage in rapid military modernization of its conventional and nuclear capabilities to become a world-class military on par with the United States by 2049. On critical global challenges such as Russia's invasion of Ukraine, China's role remains problematic. The difficulty of dealing with China is magnified by Xi Jinping's dismantling of collective political leadership and establishment of himself as the sole leader of China. With respect to the U.S. approach to the PRC, the Biden administration has identified and made significant progress in 3 areas: invest, align, and compete. First, the Biden administration has worked with Congress to invest over $1 trillion at home to improve U.S. economic innovation and competitiveness. This includes the 2021 Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, 2022 CHIPS and Science Act, and the Inflation Reduction Act. Second, the United States has strengthened its unique advantage we have over the PRC, our alliances and partnerships. For example, Japan now not only shares a common strategic vision with the United States, but is also committed to do far more than its own defense. Australia has agreed to enhance force posture cooperation and more U.S. rotational presence. The Philippines has provided the United States with access to 4 additional military locations. The United States has resumed large-scale military drills with South Korea. The Biden administration is also facilitating greater cooperation between allies and partners. This includes the U.S., Japan, Australia, and U.S., Japan, ROK Trilateral Cooperation, AUKUS, and the Quad. NATO is also increasingly engaging with Indo-Pacific countries. Third, and central to the U.S. approach to the PRC, is the need to outcompete China. DoD has prioritized the PRC as the pacing challenge and Taiwan contingency as the pacing scenario. The Department of Defense is improving U.S. posture and presence, logistics and pre-position material, and infrastructure throughout the Indo-Pacific. The United States is enhancing joint allied and partner capabilities, increasing training and information sharing, and co-developing critical and emerging technologies. DoD is also investing in new operational concepts to fight in a highly contested environment. The Biden administration has made clear that engagement with China is necessary to prevent competition from spiraling into conflict. However, U.S. engagement efforts to date are prone to disruption, and the PRC continues to stonewall calls for critical dialogues. Overall, the U.S. approach towards the PRC has encouraged Beijing to compete more against the United States and our allies and partners. The PRC blames the United States and our allies and partners for what it views as its deteriorating security environment and does not view its behavior as problematic. We have not seen any clear indicators of dampening PRC ambitions or activities. There is a real risk that Beijing could miscalculate, and intensified U.S.-China competition could lead to confrontation. Moving forward, the United States needs to continue to deepen our alliances and partnerships and strengthen this critical advantage that we have. The Biden administration also needs to bolster its economic strategy towards the PRC. If joining the CPTPP is completely off the table, the United States should look at other bilateral or multilateral arrangements. The United States should also continue to work with our coalition of friends to counter PRC economic coercion. The United States also needs to continue to invest in our military to ensure that DoD has the resources needed to train and invest in our capabilities to deny PRC aggression and to build a more resilient and dispersed U.S. posture. And finally, the United States needs to maintain high-level engagements with China and expand people-to-people contacts. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lin. Dr. Hill, please.
Thank you so much, Chairman Reid and Senator Wicker. It's a great honour to be with you, my fellow witnesses and the members of the committee today. Before I begin my opening remarks, I'd just like to flag that I have a new article in Foreign Affairs with my colleague Angela Stent on this very topic, and I would just ask that that could be submitted for the record so the members and staff could read it later.
Without objection.
Thank you. I want to focus on one specific challenge in my opening remarks and look forward to answering the questions that you and Senator Wicker laid out in your opening statements. But first of all, just as you, Senator Reid, emphasised in your introduction, Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February 2022 was an assault on the post-World War II global order. And the war in Ukraine has necessitated the third intervention by the United States in a European conflict in a little over a century, and what will now likely be our third attempt at revamping the international security system. Now, this world order wasn't just our order, but a set of rules that all nations, including Russia and its predecessor, the Soviet Union, had agreed to. Russia violated the United Nations Charter and fundamental principles of international law by attacking an independent state that had been recognized by all the international community, including Russia itself, for more than 30 years. So the current challenge in Europe is how to craft a more durable regional security arrangement that rolls back Russia's land grab in Ukraine, is embraced by all Europeans, and sets a precedent for reinvigorating the largest set of international agreements. We need to find a formula that's not entirely dependent on the military and economic power of the United States or its political leadership to ensure long-term success. The European security environment was irrevocably altered or ruptured in 2014 when Russia annexed Ukraine's Crimean Peninsula and sparked off a brutal conflict and proxy war in the Donbass region. None of the United States and Europe's mechanisms and practices for keeping the peace after World War II and during the Cold War had much, if any, effect on deterring Russia from seizing Crimea in 2014 or attempting to take Kiev and the rest of Ukraine in 2022. Western deterrence failed in part because American and European policymakers never meaningfully emphasized the West's red lines. Indeed, one might even ask, what were our red lines? Because we certainly did not appear to uphold the post-World War II principle of ensuring independent state sovereignty and territorial integrity after 2014. And instead, European leaders, led by Germany and France, rushed to push Russia's annexation of Crimea to one side and broker a quick peace settlement in Donbass, the Minsk Accords, which would have limited Ukraine's sovereignty if fully implemented. The tepid Western political response to Russia's violation of Ukraine's territory and the limited application of sanctions after this first invasion convinced Moscow that attacking Ukraine was not, in fact, a serious breach of post-World War II norms. And Western commentary since 2014 has more frequently focused on the risk of stepping over Russia's red lines rather than enforcing the West's. We've spent more time contemplating the perils of provoking Russia's mercurial President Vladimir Putin than the merits of bolstering Europe's resilience to Putin's coercive power. In charting a path forward, we need to recognise that the war in Ukraine has been brewing for decades because of a key distinction in the way that the international community and the United States approached the collapse of the Soviet Union and the former Yugoslavia in the 1990s. In the case of Yugoslavia, the country was dissolved without the recognition of a single successor state. Serbia's territorial claims against all of its neighbours were rejected. In the case of the USSR, the United States and every other country recognised Russia as the sole successor state. Moscow inherited the Soviet Union's UN Security Council seat and its other privileges and obligations, as well as, it seemed, the Soviet Union's Cold War sphere of influence in Eastern Europe. Ukraine, along with all the other former Soviet republics, fell into a grey zone where Russia's interests seemed to trump theirs, and they were deemed by all of us Russia's near abroad. Vladimir Putin has repeatedly stated that Moscow has the right to dominate this neighbourhood and claim lost territory. For Putin, the war in Ukraine is a continuation of the Soviet struggle with the United States to carve up Europe after 1945. Russia sees NATO as a US Cold War bloc, a cover for American imperialism, and not as an alliance of equals to ensure common defence and security. So in this context, for Russia, NATO's post-Cold War expansion and Ukraine's reluctance to implement the Minsk Accords in Donbass became the current war's casus belli. So redefining European security and restoring deterrence will involve explicitly countering this narrative, building an international coalition against Russia's aggression to facilitate the eventual settlement of the war in Ukraine will require the same. The US and its allies must clarify and emphasise that they are supporting Ukraine on the battlefield to uphold the United Nations Charter and international law. We need to step up our diplomatic efforts, including in the UN, to convince friends and middle powers in the so-called Global South that our goal is not to retain Western supremacy, but to keep the world safer for every nation. If Russia succeeds in carving up Ukraine, then the future sovereignty and territorial integrity of other states could be imperiled. So upholding international norms must once again be a central part of our global security strategy. Thank you so much.